Welcome to the webinar, which is entitled A Better Customer Experience Through Using Tablets in the Dealership. My name's David Mackay, and for those of you that I've not had the opportunity to meet, I'd like to briefly introduce myself. I've been with CDK for 2 years as an international product manager for vehicles. I work alongside Dean Packer and John Martin in terms of actually developing the showroom product, but probably the core part of my role is as a product owner to a sprint team, that's developers and quality assurance testers who actually develop the software. And my role within that team is to very much represent the voice of the customer. So hopefully that we can make sure that the software that we develop accurately reflects the demands and needs of the marketplace. Now, in terms of fulfilling that role, I've actually had 20 years of automotive dealership experience, of 18 of which I was an Autoline customer. If we boil the sales process down, I think there's 3 fundamental aims that we need to achieve to gain a sale. The first of these is to build rapport with the customer. For many dealers, they've invested in soft seating areas and coffee bars, and it's often true that the rapport building process will take place in these locations. In terms of building desire for the vehicle, well, the obvious place for this to happen is by the vehicle itself, so the sales executive can demonstrate the features and benefits of that particular vehicle. When it comes to negotiating price, in many instances the customer will have a part exchange vehicle, and the valuation of this forms a fundamental part of actually gaining a sale. Now, I think it's fair to say that for all 3 of these steps, none of them is actually best performed at a desk. So in lots of ways, we've got a fundamental disconnect between the actual sales process itself and the IT that's involved. What we need to do, therefore, is to free the sales consultant from his desk and give him the information that he gets via the DMS where actually the sales consultant is, whether that's within the showroom or actually outside in terms of actually appraising the vehicle. For the purposes of the demonstration today, I'm going to imagine that a customer has just walked into the showroom, they've indicated they're looking to purchase a new vehicle, and they've actually brought their current car with them and they'd like an appraisal on it. So the steps I'm going to walk through is to capture the customer information, then actually go outside and do the appraisal on the vehicle, and then look at actually selecting a vehicle for the customer that meets their requirements. To carry out this, I'm actually going to be using an iPad mini, which you'll see reflected on the screen in front of you. So the customer's arrived in the showroom, and as I'm going through my initial qualification process, I can use the tablet as I'm walking around to actually capture some basic customer details and what it is they're looking for. So in this case, we can imagine it's a Miss Jones who's come in. So I can basically put a surname in, and it will then look to see if we've got any existing inquiries that actually match that particular name. So we look through, and the search actually returns a few results from other Joneses. But in this case, I'm going to imagine it's a brand new customer that we've not seen before. So I'm going to take the option to continue creating a new customer. Now on this screen, as you can see, I can capture all the address, telephone numbers, etc. And I can always come back to this screen later on in the process if I want to capture any further detail. One other feature we have in the bottom right hand corner you will see is the current vehicle. So if we see the customer actually driving onto the forecourt, we can click on that, enter the registration number, and if the vehicle exists in CRM, it immediately will create a new inquiry and pull back all of the customer details that we already know. So as we move forward, the next thing we get into is the basic qualification. Now it turns out this customer is really looking for a Volkswagen, and not quite sure on the model at the moment. Can't decide between an Up or a Polo, but definitely wants a Volkswagen. And the other thing that we find out from the conversation is that she's really looking for a diesel. So we say, okay, it's a Volkswagen diesel that we're looking for. We can take notes on here. We can get information about the budget, etc. as well. So you can qualify the customer to whatever level that you find out. So as we move forward, the next screen is where we can enter details of the customer's current vehicle. Now, we could be using this vehicle as a part exchange, but for the cases of this scenario, we're going to imagine that the customer actually doesn't know the registration number, so we're going to capture that when we actually get out to the vehicle. The next step is to go through the data disclaimers. Obviously, it's a necessary evil from a marketing point of view that you have to go through this, but we've tried to make it as easy as possible in terms of you can just select the button. So there I've said dealer agreements, yes, and it's turned them all on. It may be that the customer, for example, is happy to hear from the OEM but doesn't really want to be phoned by the OEM. So I've clicked them all on, and then quickly I can turn them off. And it could be that the customer indicates that they don't want to be contacted by a third party at all. So with just a couple of clicks on the overall status button, I can indicate that as well. The last step of customer capture is to basically record our source of business. Again, we've set this as mandatory, so we can see the yellow flash on the left hand side to indicate to us that it needs to be filled in. So I just click on the source of business. In this case, we'll say the customer's seen a national press advert. And lastly, the contact method. So we're going to say originally this customer actually phoned us, so I'll mark it down as a telephone inquiry. So once we've done that, we can select done, and then we've captured all the basic customer information. The tablet application actually follows all of the activity recording. So at this stage, I'm going to say, yes, I'm still with the customer. But if I said no, at this point, it would kick off the activity recording, all depending on how it was set up on the system. So I'm just going to say yes, and that's going to return me back to the main menu. We currently have two versions of vehicle appraisal, online and offline. We recognise that it can be a challenge to have a complete Wi-Fi coverage over all the areas where you might want to actually appraise a vehicle. For example, it could be if the site's congested that the customer actually parks their current vehicle down the road, and it would be difficult to get Wi-Fi coverage in that scenario. So we can either do an online appraisal, which is directly into the DMS, or we can use the version that I'm going to demonstrate here, which is offline. Now what that basically means is that you can do the appraisal at any time. You do not need any connectivity at all, either via Wi-Fi or 3G. The only time you need to be connected to Wi-Fi is to actually then submit the appraisal to the DMS. So what we're going to go through here is do an offline appraisal, and then later on I'm going to show you how you can actually bring it into the system. So if I click on start, there's the first step. The only details I actually need to enter is the registration number. Again, we're using the yellow flash, as you can see on the left-hand side. So the registration number of the vehicle that I have is GJ06ZTN. Now I can go on and enter the VIN number, I can enter a description of the vehicle, the colour, etc. But I'm actually later on going to use a cap data import to actually fill the information in for me, so I don't need to fill it in here. We've recently added some new features to the desktop version of the appraisal in terms of service history and number of keys, etc. And we've recreated that on the tablet version. So the customer tells me, in fact, looking at the service book here, I can see that it has a full service history. The customer also tells me that they've currently got 2 keys for the vehicle. The other thing I can do at this stage as well is take an overall shot of the vehicle in terms of an actual sort of condition shot. Now, as well as helping out the appraiser, I could actually use this shot maybe later on in terms of advertising the vehicle as soon as it comes in, before I've taken the official shots that I want to use on the internet. So I've captured the picture of the overall shot of the vehicle there. And then the next step is to move on and then capture any damage. Now, unfortunately, I've noticed that this vehicle's got a rather nasty scratch on the bonnet. So by clicking onto the bonnet, I can say that's scratched. And again, I want to take a picture of that. And if I just focus in on the bonnet, which is obviously very useful for whoever's subsequently valuing the vehicle to get a very good impression of the actual damage on the vehicle. So once that's done, I could then walk all the way around, record any other damage that I note, and when I'm finished with that process, the last step is then to click save. Now I need to be in Wi-Fi range at this point. If I wasn't, it would actually say to me, you need to get Wi-Fi before submitting. So here I'm going to click yes, and the appraisal was then submitted back to the DMS system. So when we're back in the showroom, if we can imagine that we're actually walking around the vehicles now in the showroom, and the customer's seen a particular vehicle that they're interested in and wants to know a little bit more about it and maybe compare it to some other vehicles that we might have in stock. So if I go into select a vehicle, You'll remember in the customer capture application, we actually said that the customer was interested in a Volkswagen diesel, and it's pulled that information straight across into the search criteria, as you can see on the left-hand side. So immediately I can hit search and find some vehicles that might be of interest to our customer. So the customer's indicated that they're interested in the top 2 vehicles on the search. So if I select both of those, in the same way as we do on the desktop, what we can actually then do is compare those side by side. So if I move forward, we've got them now and we can start comparing them. Now what's very useful, if you can imagine if you're out by the vehicle, is if the customer's got any detailed questions about the specification, etc., we've got that information at our fingertips. So for example, our customer might be interested in the fuel consumption of the 2 vehicles in question. In this case, they're both at 51.4 on the extra urban. And maybe the customer's got a question about will the vehicle fit in their garage, so equally I can bring up the vehicle dimensions, etc. So we've got lots of different information that's available at our fingertips, which is obviously very useful when we're walking around the showroom. We can also look at the vehicle details, see them side by side. We can look at pricing just to give an indicative figure of pricing for the customer, and we can also go in to configure the vehicles. Via the configure button, I can actually get into the configuration of the vehicle so that I can amend factory fitted options, trims and colours if the status of the vehicle allows me to do so. For dealer fitted option, we can actually add media. So let's imagine this particular customer is interested in the roof rack, but is not really sure about which types and what's available and even how to fit them. So if we imagine there's a sales consultant that we need to go and speak to our sales manager at this stage, we could actually leave the customer whilst we're off and let them actually look at a video of a roof rack being fitted to explain the product to them a little bit better.
I'm going to show you how to assemble and fit this genuine Ford roof bar kit. You have to get the bracket that fastens to the roof, slide it in and then twist.
So once we've been through the media, we can actually then select the options that the customer is interested in. So in this case, they've decided they are going to go for the roof rack. They also want a tow bar. And we say done, and at this point the vehicle is now configured, and we could then go on to configure the second vehicle if we wanted to. We also have the ability to compare 3 vehicles in this screen, and we can add and remove vehicles at any time. As part of the configuration, we can also add incentives to the deal. Now this is actually hidden behind the pound icon, so it's slightly hidden away and not immediately obvious to the customer that it's there. But in this case, as a retail deal, if the incentives have been set up on the system, it shows the incentives that are available on this particular vehicle. So in this case, we're going to select the free parking sensors, and we also note that there's a finance scheme that has a finance deposit allowance on it of £500, so we can select that again as part of the sale and configure that into the inquiry. So at this point we've got the vehicle fully configured and the customer's decided that they definitely want to go with the one on the left. So by clicking select, it takes us through to a summary page, because obviously the configuration process can take some time, so this is really just a chance for us to go through with the customer what they've selected so that we make sure that we've agreed on all of the options, etc., that they're selecting before we click confirm, which just returns us over to the front page. Again, we've got activity recording at this point if we require it. So you'll recall that earlier on we did an offline appraisal out in the car park. So the last part of the appraisal process is to then import that offline appraisal into the inquiry. So if I click on the trade-in appraisal application, this is where I can actually access the online part of the application, or actually do an import, which is what I want to do in this case. So we can see for the offline appraisal that we've actually got 6 outstanding at the moment. So if I click upon it, it will show me the list of ones that we have, and in this case it's the bottom one that we want to bring in, the Yaris. So as soon as we click on that, it goes away and does a data lookup. In this case it's using CAP, and it will then go for that registration number and find out all the information that we have about that. So we can see we've actually brought in the VIN, we've got a full vehicle description, we've got colour information, registration date, etc. We've also got the make, model and variant all filled in, so we can move straight through. We've also got the option on the top right hand side here to decide whether we want to use this vehicle at this stage as a part exchange or not against the inquiry. So if I click next, it shows me the photos that I took earlier. This is the general condition shot. And also in terms of the damage, it shows me the damage that I've recorded. I could go and look at the photos, etc. The final part of the import is to actually select any vehicle extras that we've got. So in this case, we'll say it has an alarm, it's got an immobiliser, etc., which is obviously very useful if you then decide to retail the vehicle to have the correct features in the show and in terms of vehicle advertising. So once we've done that, we're very quickly brought to a summary that shows us basically everything that we've done, the basic details of the vehicle, as I say, any damage that we've recorded and any extras, etc. So we just click done, and this appraisal has now been brought into the DMS. It's made a note here that we've got no colour or trim, which we'd have to correct before we can move forward. So hopefully you'll see that in a very short period of time, we've captured some customer information, qualified the customer, gone outside and done an appraisal, and then gone through a vehicle selection and configuration process without at any point sitting down or touching a desktop computer. So in respect of the technology that we're using for the tablet, we've got two modes, as I mentioned, online and offline. For the online technology, we're using a product called Browser Client, which basically is presenting the DMS actually inside a browser window. So you really are interacting with the DMS. The updates consequently are all in real time. Now this is ideal for what we call hybrid working. That's basically when the sales consultant is making use of both a desktop and a tablet device. Now the important thing is that there is absolutely no native software at all on the device, which has two important factors. First of all, there's no update hassles in terms of the software is always the latest version. You haven't got to go through and to update an application to get the latest software. And secondly, it's device independent. Because it's using a browser, you can use it on any modern tablet. In fact, anything that's running any of the latest versions of iOS or any version of Android from 4.2 onwards. The other technology we're using is for the offline, particularly for the appraisal. Now that's using a cache browser technology. So the important thing about that is it can be used anywhere. There is absolutely no need for either 3G or Wi-Fi connection whilst you're using the application. In fact, the only time you need connectivity at all is when you're uploading it at the end of the process. Again, there's no native software on the device, so again, you've got no update hassles, and equally, it's also device independent. The applications that I've demonstrated today, that's customer capture, vehicle selection and configuration, and appraisal in both the online and offline modes, are currently in pilot. We're currently developing the offer mode, which is local and remote. The remote application can actually allow you to send an offer to a customer, which they can then view on their mobile phone or tablet or computer or whatever device the customer chooses to use. We're also currently looking at finance setup to allow finance to be configured actually on the tablet device. The roadmap as we move through 2015 is really to look at the complete front of house process, so moving towards a situation where a sales executive no longer actually needs a desktop to perform their day-to-day operations. Hopefully you found the webinar to be interesting and are interested to know a little bit more. In terms of the Phase 1 general release, that's the applications that I've showed today. We're looking to actually release the product in Q2 2015. There isn't any charge for the applications themselves as they're included in the Autoline Drive license. And if you're interested in knowing a little bit more, please speak to your account manager. So in conclusion, many thanks for your time and attention today, and I look forward to sharing the other tablet applications with you as they get developed.